Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're doing a box office preview for this upcoming weekend, which sees the brand new Hunger Games prequel, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the longest title in the history of the Hunger Games franchise, and also projected to have the lowest opening of the franchise by quite a bit. Expected to only open to $50 million domestically, though some are projecting it to be as low as $47 million. Obviously, we have a range of that, probably somewhere between $40 and $55 million. And so who knows exactly where the domestic for this movie is going to end up. But if it's anything like what we saw with The Marvels, where there were very, very strong projections going into it, like a month out from its release, then projecting it to be $85+ million, massive $150 million global, turned it out to only be $110 million globally and made about only $46 million domestic. Obviously, a huge drop-off there, so we'll have to wait and see exactly what we're going to see from the Hunger Games prequel, starring Rachel Zegler, of whom even people like Jeremy Jahns has gone out of his way to say, yeah, she's not good in this film. She's just there, and can't really say I'm all that surprised, apparently, just being brought in for her voice, which of course she does have, but acting chops probably not nearly as up there as what many would have suspected for a role where essentially it's Katniss 2.0, seemingly a much more subpar version of Katniss Everdeen from the original films in this prequel series. We also have the second weekend numbers for The Marvels, and sure enough, the film is projected from Box Office Pro to be seeing a 65% drop in its second week after a dismal opening weekend. This just makes things even worse. So before we get further, please make sure you smash that like button, light that fire button, obviously smash the rumble button as well, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification. That way you know every time a video, a live stream goes live on the channel. So first, starting off with Tony and Nance over at Deadline. Isn't it interesting that when films are not doing very well, they immediately go to the global opening? And I know you could say that they've done this in previous films, but when you have a lot of other films where the numbers have seemed to be pretty impressive, right, pretty strong, you typically see some early reports of just the domestic numbers, and then also in addition to that, the internationals. But I do find it interesting that they do these combined totals for films to try to make them look somehow better than what they actually are doing. Even though this film only cost $100 million, that's of course according to the estimates coming out right now. I would not be surprised if it actually cost a lot more than that, seeing that Hollywood is notorious for just lying about their budgets and overspending on things. We of course will have to wait and see if those numbers ever get updated. But this coming from Tony and Nance at Deadline, and what will be a revived week for moviegoing after the actors' strike and heading into the Thanksgiving holiday. Lionsgate, the Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is looking to lead a global frame with a $100 million start. Now, we're already seeing the narrative being perpetuated, right? This false narrative that somehow, some way, audience members were just dying and just waiting for the actor strike to end. That's all people wanted. The reason why no one's going to the movies is because they don't have Hollywood actors giving interviews. They don't have Hollywood actors going onto the red carpet at their premieres. That's the reason why it's not doing well. I've already gone into the myriad of reasons to why that is just complete and utter crap, especially just on the surface thinking about, well, the people showing up to the premiere are going to be mostly shills, right? Mostly media shills that are going to see it likely anyway and getting a free screening to go see it for that fact. And then the mega fans who are going to be seeing it no matter what. So to say that the premiere itself is somehow going to make things any better just does not actually work. And to somehow say that interviews on late night shows, of which the audience that watches late night shows are not the target demographic for this movie, yeah, I don't know exactly what you're trying to think here, right? The only thing that these days really drives movies is word of mouth. And right now, the early word of mouth on this movie is it's just not that good. Not only do you have, of course, a lot of critics coming out being very, very cynical towards the actual film. But then you have regular, everyday people like Jeremy Jahns, who is also giving this film, his rating for this movie was, it's a good time if you're drunk, basically putting it into saying, hey, there's some interesting things that they try to do with this world of Panem, and try to kind of flesh that world out just a little bit to show you what exactly happened to lead to the world of the Hunger Games that most of us know from the original series, based off of the original novels, which of course were ripoffs of things like Battle Royale and many other, much better properties. But I think that ultimately, at least according to people like him, it just falls apart quite easily. And a big part of that for him, at the very least, was that Rachel Zegler just was not able to really hold her own, especially in comparison to and in connection with some of the other actors who apparently steal the show much more than she does. It goes on here to say, the feature take of the Suzanne Collins prequel novel, who is also an executive producer here, about the early days of the ultimate villain, Coriolanus Snow, and the Hunger Games is eyeing a $50 million on tracking and another $50 million abroad. Through 4 movies, the Hunger Games franchise has reaped $3 billion. Now, again, interesting that they go on to say, oh, well, let's think about all of these films together. Okay, let's actually look at them together. Tony and Nance, let's actually be a little bit more honest about what's actually going on here, right? So first, we talk about the original film. We've gone through this chart before. These are just ticket sales estimates based on the average ticket price of the year that the film came out and the opening weekend numbers. If you go to the original film back in 2012, that film's opening weekend domestic was around 19 million tickets. The second film, Catching Fire, actually did a little bit better with 19.4 million tickets. And then once they announced that they were going to have the last of the story split into 2 movies, I think that probably drove some people away because, okay, you're only giving us part 1 of a story. Okay, I don't really want to wait a year for that. And a lot of people in general just do not like seeing incomplete stories. It's kind of lazy storytelling. And at this point, it was very clearly also a cash grab by the studio, who wanted to try to, again, expand this out further than what it should have been. That still, again, made 14 million ticket sales, with the following film making 12.1 million ticket sales. And so overall, again, a much larger drop between the second and third movie, but still hanging out just a little bit. It gets even worse, though, right? Things get really catastrophic when you look at how much of a difference there is between 2015 and what is upcoming this weekend. So, as you all saw, right, the projections are somewhere around $50 million. Box Office Pro has right now the numbers being somewhere around $47 million. So let's just, again, for the sake of argument, say the film is at $45 million coming this coming weekend. That's definitely a possibility. That would only equate to around 3.4 million tickets based on the average ticket price. That would be just about the same as what we saw for Captain Marvel. So this film, for the Marvels rather, Captain Marvel 2. So there's a very good chance that this film has the same level of ticket sales as the Marvels did. Now, the one thing that the Marvels has that the Hunger Games prequel does not have is a much larger budget, an extra $100+ million, in fact. But in both cases, you have movies that still need to make quite a bit of money. In the case of the Hunger Games prequel, it needs to make around $250 to $300 million to break even. So is that possible? Sure. With a $100 million projected start, and the chances of it actually coming in lower than that, at least plausible, based on what we have seen more recently at the box office, yeah. Let's just say I think it's going to be a steep hill for this film to actually climb, and I can't wait to see what those actual numbers are going into the weekend. What do I think is going to happen? Personally, I think somewhere between 40 and 50, I think makes a lot of sense domestically, with an overall international number probably being somewhere around 85 to $100 million would be my guess. It's interesting how when you talk about going into this, the opening night tonight, for instance, you don't really have anything being mentioned, at least according to the Deadline article, about the pre-sales. And so, as you remember, right, they were talking about how the pre-sales for Captain Marvel and the Marvels 2 was Captain Marvel 2, the Marvels, was basically insinuating that the film was tracking in a certain light, that it was tracking well below films like The Flash, like it was tracking well below previous Marvel releases as well. And turns out, hey, guess what? It actually matched up to what the weekend itself was, having the worst MCU opening weekend in the entire history of the MCU. You're not really seeing anything talked about here. Like, I actually tried to do a Control F, search for the pre-sales because they've mentioned it in previous articles when other movies have come out. And the only thing that's mentioned is about Five Nights at Freddy's launching in China and the pre-sales there. So are they maybe hiding those pre-sale numbers because they're indicating the film's going to come in a lot less than what was anticipated? Or is it that the studio is not releasing that data, or there is not a whole lot of data because they don't expect it to be a film that gets a lot of pre-sales? I honestly don't know. As someone that has seen the other films of the franchise and thought that the first 2 were okay, right? The first 2 were fine, the last 2 not so good. I don't really know how much desire there is for this movie. Apparently, the book that's based off of, right, the prequel from the same author, did not sell all that well. So I can't really say it's a surprise to see right now the projections that this film is going to have a very, very low opening domestic, especially when you look at the average ticket sales there. But we also have not only have the $38 to $50 million that was originally being projected. So if you want to go back in time a little bit to Box Office Pro, originally they were projecting it to be somewhere between 38 and 50 going to this coming weekend. They're now saying that they think it's going to be around 47. If you go up a little bit on their page, though, you'll see that their overall projection is somewhere between 42 and 55. So theoretically, you could say, well, it's trending upwards, so maybe that's a sign that the actor strike ending is changing the world. I'm going to be interested to see, because Box Office Pro has been right before and has also been wrong before. They were able to predict how big Barbie was going to be before any of the actual ticket sales were being released for Thursday. It took people at Deadline and other places to actually, get right up there to be able to kind of tell that film was going to be as successful as it was. Box Office Pro was able to predict that pretty, at a pretty long range out from its initial release. It's going to be interesting to see, though, if this is going to be able to hold out, if this film is actually going to come around that $45-46 million mark, or if it's going to come in the lower 40s. Right now, the way that things have been going in the box office, the way that things have been going in general with Rachel Zegler, etc., I just don't see the film taking off all that much. When you have people like Jeremy Jahns not on your side, it's kind of hard to sell a film to just the regular everyday movie fan, unless you're a hardcore fan of the franchise and hardcore fan of someone like a Rachel Zegler. I don't really see exactly who this movie is going to be made for, but hey, we've been wrong here before, and that can absolutely happen, and we'll be interested to see where those numbers hang out. What to me is actually even more interesting than the Hunger Games numbers is the numbers for the Marvels. As I mentioned, it's projected from Box Office Pro to be only making $16 million this weekend in its second week of release, dropping 65%. Now, because this film came in as low as it did, the lowest box office of the entire franchise, and now it's projected to have a typical, as I said last weekend, expect the typical MCU drop, which is 65% or higher. So I would not be surprised if when the actuals come in, it's somewhere north of 65%, somewhere between 65 and 75% most likely. And so the fact that that's going into the weekend right before Thanksgiving, the fact that you do have some, quote unquote competition with Trolls band together, and also, of course, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, it's showing us here that the Marvels and the MCU brand just does not really have the staying power that it once did. Speaking of Trolls band together, I don't really follow much when it comes to the Trolls franchise. That film is expected to open up to $28.2 million. And so while Hunger Games is projected to own the weekend, at least domestically, I would not be surprised if Trolls band together, if at the very least it's good and inoffensive, is actually able to leg out a movie like Hunger Games, because this is going to be the movie that kids go to, right, that the parents will bring their kids to over the long term. So I'm very interested to see what actually happens with those numbers. But those are currently the numbers as they stand. What do y'all think is going to happen? Do y'all think that we're going to see some massive numbers coming in for Hunger Games? Right now, we're really not seeing that happen. As I mentioned, even though the film only cost $100 million, which will also be historically the lowest budget compared to any other film in the franchise, right? I can actually update this chart now because we have these numbers. Interestingly enough, this would be the lowest costing film of the franchise, with just about the first movie being the only film that's even somewhat equivalent. These are numbers here that have been adjusted for inflation to give you an idea of what the dollar in today's world would have been worth back in that time, and the dollar of that time would have been worth in today's world. So it's going to be interesting to see where this thing plays out and how it plays out. Do you think Hunger Games is going to be able to overperform? Do you think that we're going to see closer to $50 million domestic opening, over $100 million, or do you think it's going to be lower than that? As I always say, we never want to stay purely in our bubble, and we have to recognize that there are definitely normies out there that are going to be drawn to see this movie. But after what happened with the Marvels, and based off of the fact that this movie, the Hunger Games prequel, seems to have even less traction than the Marvels does, I just don't see how it can be nearly as successful. And obviously, when I say that, it's very much said sarcastically. But let me know your thoughts about this and anything else I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button. A lot of the fun of Austin, smash the rumble button as well. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your night. And as always, God bless. And now for a special shout out to all of my Chosen of Valhalla members for the month of November, starting off with Father Luca Illich, Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel, the name Eagle Rider. Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel by the same name. Matt317, check out his Twitch channel. Laura, the Mother Major General Story. Sorry, I didn't have enough spirit fingers there. Mr. Roy and ZK Man, who can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and video, check out the top link in the video description below. You get access to things like the giveaways channel, a podcast that I try to do every single month with a bunch of other awesome YouTubers, and a plethora of other content. So go ahead and check that out if you want more. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.